Good morning. Thank you for everyone who joined early. We are technically just shy of the 9 o'clock hour, so we're going to give folks another 2 minutes or so to filter in, but thank you so much for joining.
Come on. Don't make
Good
any
morning.
email. I put a call on the friend. You got your badge done.
Yeah, I'm gonna see if it'll work now. They said to give it a few minutes before it.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the first installation of the BRICS seminar series in 2024. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday season. My name is Allison Garcia. I'm a program manager working alongside Dr. Matt McAuliffe in support of the BRICS platform, the Biomedical Research Informatics Computing System. Today, we are going to be focusing on two aspects of the BRICS platform, specifically the PPRL as well as the data repository. All right. So just want to go over a little bit of logistics for today's session. This session is being recorded, so please keep your microphone muted. If you need to come off mute during the Q&A portions of today's session, please feel free to do so. We do encourage active participation, so feel free to take advantage of the chat during today's session. The chat will be monitored by staff from our team throughout the session, as well as the opportunity to ask during the live Q&A sessions. We have just 1 hour together, so definitely excited to kick it off. We're going to kick it off today with an introduction by Dr. Matt McAuliffe, followed by 2 sessions from members of the BRICS team. The first session will be an overview on PPRL and GUID. That will be presented today by Taheen Zaman, and then we are going to learn about the data repository presented by Michelle Harris, and then we're going to have some time at the end outside of the times for questions during the individual sessions to ask overarching questions at the end, and then Dr. McAuliffe will close it out. So again, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to your participation in today's session. With that, I will turn it over to Dr. McAuliffe.
Great. Thanks, Allison. So good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to talk about BRICS. I lead the BRICS effort, which is, again, the Biomedical Research Informatics Computing System. And we've built a system that is kind of a base foundation and can be deployed in a number of different ways. And you can see some of those instances of BRICS on the right-hand side. We support, for example, traumatic brain injury, both assessment data, imaging data, sample data, as well as iGene, for example, where we store in our repository assessment kind of data, demographics kind of data, as well as derived omics data, as well as a number of other platforms that we support around NIH. Okay, next slide. One of our major foundational pieces is to make sure that we're building a system that supports the FAIR principles. And I'm not going to go into each one of these. I think all of you have been around here at NIH long enough to know the importance of these. And we really strive to make the data in our repository findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And we'll be touching on 2 of those modules within the BRICS system that address some of those aspects of FAIR principles. Okay, next slide. So we've been building BRICS now probably for over a decade, and with that, and working with a lot of the researchers and working groups and other groups around NIH, which you see some on the left-hand side, we've taken a lot of those ideas and they have filtered into the BRICS system, which is an open source system. But really what we try to do is make it a system that is generic and that can be deployed in a number of different ways. So it's very flexible and it is also modular. And you see on the right-hand side there a list of some of those, and I already mentioned some of those different repositories or instances of BRICS that we've deployed for the different institutes. Okay, next slide. So this is kind of a little bit different way of looking at it and also shows some of the flexibility. There are instances of BRICS that have all the modules enabled within it. We have instances that can share a data dictionary. We work very closely to the data dictionary efforts around NIH. We work with NLM as well as NCI, NINDS, and building and supporting common data elements. And I hesitate with common because common becomes a question of how common they are, but we've tried to make them as common as possible. So if we start another instance of BRICS, we look at what other people did in collecting those data elements and we try to reuse those data elements to make them even more common. Or we look to NLM and help and use their CDE browser to better understand to better harmonize data as it's collected into the BRICS system. We also, and we're going to talk about the PPRL system, the privacy preserving record linkage system. You can actually stand up an instance of BRICS with its own version, its own silo PPRL system. In our case, we call it the GUID. But we also have now built a centralized GUID system where we can collect or we can generate GUIDs that are more universal or more global across the different instances of BRICS. And you'll hear more about that shortly. On the right-hand side, you see there we're just about ready or working on a new deployment of a BRICS intramural instance. It will be on the cloud under the Strides paradigm, and it will be a mechanism to be able to collect and share data. Again, we support all different kinds of data types, phenotypic, imaging, and omics data. And that all comes as just one tool or one infrastructure if you want that. You don't have to worry about how you're going to connect to a different repository that may have imaging or other omics. We also have other tools that are part of this. We connect into and are able to generate DOIs, data set DOIs, and that's under a contract from ODSS. So we've now taken advantage of that contract. So lots of different functionality, and you're going to learn a little bit more about that. Next slide. I'm sorry, next slide, please. Doesn't seem to be advancing. See if I can do that. Oh, whoops. Allison, are you able to advance to the next slide? No, did we lose Allison? You know what? Until maybe she dropped off. So it looks like she was disconnected. So I'm going to share my screen quickly because I have the same slides here. And there we go. Let's see what we got here. Presentation mode. Can everyone see these slides?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right. Whoops. Okay, so these are a number of the tools or components that are part of modules, sometimes we call them part of BRICS. We have a data mapping and transformation tool, a data dictionary that I talked about. We're going to talk a lot about the data repository. Michelle is going to talk a lot about that. We have an electronic data capture tool called Proforms. That's 21 CFR Part 11 compliant, very functional. We have a thing called a meta study where you can actually the data that goes into the repository actually goes into the database and you can query it. We also have this concept of a meta study where you can actually just upload files, and it's a way of sharing data, but it's a little bit easier to share that data because it doesn't have to be harmonized against the common data elements, and that then it just shares the files. We also have our unique our PPRL system called the GUID. A number of other tools, query tool. We have a clinical trials management system, a BRICS, an imaging tool to actually package up images for easier submission into the system. We have a forms tool. Another important tool is a newer tool down at the bottom is STAMS, which is our specimen tracking and management system. And you're going to hear about some of these additional tools or modules in the future. Every month we're going to have a presentation with a new version of or a new focus on a different module within each talk each month. Very recently, we just included RAS, Research Authentication Services, that gives us multi-factor authentication, as well as it starts to set us up to be in a federated kind of system where we can also integrate with other kinds of systems that has also implemented the RAS service. So there's lots of, we just had a release in mid-December, new functionality, our Raven release. We're going to have another release in February, and then another Spider-Man release, I think, is in the May timeframe. But these are just slides that show you some of the major functionality that we deployed in this instance of BRICS. And it's just included in the slides, so you can go back and look at it. But you could always go to the link that's up in this, and we'll be sharing the slides at the BRICS website. But the documentation includes release notes for every release that we have, so you can kind of keep up with the new functionality that is part of BRICS. Okay. Oh, there you go. We're talking, we have a little bit of a summary about the Miner and Spider-Man release. Okay, and then we're going to talk. This is the first interface that you see when you log into this example into the Fitbur instance. Each instance looks very similar, except the window dressing is different. The coloring is different for that particular instance. But we're going to talk first about the subject management or the PPRL system, and then the data repository. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Tuheen, and I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to hand it back to you. Allison, are you back? Allison is not back. So
I
I'm
am
going
back.
to. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, I am back. Matt, if you don't mind continuing to share, I don't know, I got completely kicked out.
Okay, I will continue to share. I'm going to hand it off to you, Taheen.
Sounds good. Matt, I can take on for my part if you'd like.
So you want to share the slides?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
All right. So good morning, everyone. Hope everyone can see my screen. My name is Rakib Taheen Zaman. I am one of the BRICS operation team members. I mainly work with the Fitbur instance and the CDRNS instance. And as mentioned, today I will be covering an overview of the PPRL and GUID. All right, so PPRL, just for reminder, it stands for Privacy Preserving Record Linkage. It's a linking methodology to connect patient or participant data across different sources without exposing personally identifiable information. Within the BRICS platform, the PPRL methodology is done with the use of our Global Unique Identifier System, also what we commonly refer to as GUID. The Global Unique Identifier System is used to create unique identifiers for study participants without exposing personally identifiable information. This protects the privacy of the research participant, and it associates the participants across data types and studies. This is beneficial to researchers as it allows to aggregate data for specific study participants over time and space. The article cited on this slide explains how the GUID system works to help link de-identified participant data across different databases on autism research and the effectiveness of the linkages. And on the next slide, we'll cover the GUID process itself. All right, so here's like a visual guide of how a GUID is generated within the BRICS platform. So step one, generating GUID is done in the web service, which involves a client application and a server application. Using the client application, the researcher enters a specific set of personally identifiable information, or PII. The fields of PII are used by the GUID web servers. The fields of PII used by the GUID web servers are chosen to be easy to acquire and invariant over the lifetime of the subject. Most of the information can be obtained from a birth certificate. The client application process, moving on to the second step here. So the client application processes the PII into several intermediary codes using a one-way hash function. Each hash is a combination of multiple fields with at least billions of possibilities. Step 3, one-way hashes are transmitted to the GUID server for reference and storage. As a reminder, no personal information is sent to the GUID server, as the GUID web service cannot store sections of identifying information as separate fields. In step 4, the server application compares hash codes against the internal database. If there's no match, a new GUID is generated, and the application stores the association between the hash codes and the GUID for future reference. If the code matches a previous transmission, the existing associated GUID is obtained. So in both cases, the server will return a GUID to the client application. In step 5, the researcher obtains the GUID from the client application and stores it locally to establish association between the GUID and the participant's research data. No study data may be submitted to the BRICS repository without a GUID. So once data is submitted to the BRICS repository, a researcher may query this data. The GUID allows researchers to distinguish between unique subjects and recurrent subjects across all data sets. And finally, researchers can access data across studies without revealing personally identifiable information, while correlating study data across different studies and uniquely sorting between distinct and redundant data sets. All right, so the National Institute of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, in conjunction with the National Institute of Aging, the National Center of Advancing Translational Sciences, the Common Data Repository for Nursing Science, and Parkinson's Disease Biomarkers Program have successfully collaborated to develop a multi-tenant global unique identifier solution for participant sharing across institutes and studies. This is known as the NINDS Centralized GUID Solution. So basically, this will allow for the same GUID to exist for the same participant across the various instances and the study participant that the study participant may have data in. All right, so now I'm going to cover an example of creating a GUID. This will show how easy and seamless the process is. The example here will be shown to create a single GUID. However, there is a method to do batch GUID creation, which involves uploading a CSV file with the necessary patient participant information. So here we just have a screenshot of the BRICS GUID user interface when creating a single GUID. To create a GUID, the user must provide the following required fields: the full name, full date of birth, city of birth, and country of birth. And then, as seen, there are 3 optional fields if that information is collected. So here's the GUID tool with an example of like information that has been entered. And you can see here that the information is entered twice to confirm that the fields were entered correctly, such as there's no misspellings or incorrect dates entered. So again, this is also just doing a single participant in your study, where we do have a batch upload, where if you already have multiple participants enrolled, you can use the CSV upload to do multiple at the same time. So after the information is entered to the tool, and just to review, the tool will create a set of one-way hash codes based on combinations of the information entered. This is transmitted to our GUID server. If the combinations of the hashes match an existing entry, then the existing GUID is returned to the user. And if there's no matches, a new GUID will be generated based on our BRICS platform, or based on our BRICS format, which is seen in our screenshot here. And then this would be the GUID that will be used for all the data submitted for this particular study participant. All right, so that covers my demonstration and overview of PPRL and GUID. Are there any questions? I see one hand up.
Yeah, hi, this is Ishwar here. I had a quick question on the basic GUID. So how is this behind the scenes connected with the PID providers and Matt in this context, our data site services? I'm assuming you're using those to generate the unique identifiers, or is this completely separate for PPRL related GUIDs?
Right, this is completely separate from DOIs. The DOI, we assign DOIs to study and data sets, but we assign the GUID or the PPRL, which is a different system, to the actual subject.
Gotcha. Because I thought you were kind of wrapping it up under the overall umbrella of GUIDs for everything and all the different unique, global unique identifiers. Okay, gotcha.
We did originally. We had our own license with essentially with DataSite.
That's right. Yeah, I mean,
then we moved over to yours.
Yeah, but I just want. I think it might be good for people to know that that's also another type of identifier depending on the objects that you're giving. So it might be good to kind of wrap all of that under one umbrella of globally unique resolvable identifiers for different types of objects that BRICS serves or provides.
Yeah, it gets a little bit trickier with being subject identifier, patient identifier.
Sure, of course. Yeah, I
that's-
totally understand. Yeah, and the two are separate and distinct. I
Yes.
totally get it. So I wasn't sure if you were including that under the umbrella or not. That's hence my question. So.
Yeah. So to actually answer a couple of questions I see in the in the chat. NIDDK, we're going to be setting up, adding NIDDK as a user of the centralized BRICS system this spring. So that's a new one coming online soon. Another question about if a name changes. One thing and we didn't probably point out quite as well was the actually all the PII is immutable. It doesn't change over time. It's actually at birth. So it is your name at birth. So if if you were a woman and you chose to take your partner's name, your name would change, but your name at birth obviously does not change. So those things that we chose do not change over time. Yep. Oh, there we go. Allison answered in there too. There was one other question. I thought somebody else may have had their hand raised.
Yeah, that was me, Matt. This is Anu. I actually just wanted to clarify, or at least get some clarification with regard to what Ishwar was talking about. So, to the best of my understanding, DOIs could not be assigned to participants. Is that right?
That is correct.
I mean, in any instance, I just want to make sure. I thought DOIs were typically meant to be assigned to data sets or to digital objects, but I have not heard of an instance where it could be assigned to a participant. Maybe
Right.
sure.
To be clear, we do not assign DOIs to subjects.
Correct. But
Yeah,
I wonder if if anybody knows of any instance where it has been used in such a manner.
I do not, but
So I know in terms of individuals, I mean, I think the unique persistent identifier is only tied into the ORCID. From a researcher perspective, that's the only way from that direction it comes in. But as Matt said, I think this is completely distinct in terms of patient participants who are participating in the study. How do you make sure you capture them uniquely, and also it's a way to be able to connect them between studies if the same individuals is participating and things like that. So
right. No, I understand the concept of GUIDs as BRICS has implemented it, right? But I just was wondering if somebody has been utilizing
so if anyone does
DOI
know,
as a bit,
reach out to Anu. If anyone's seen DOIs, I don't think that it's possible, but it could be. But feel free to connect to Anu directly.
No, this is a great point that Anu raises, Matt, because I think it's good for us to understand the diversity of use cases that are in use today for us to be aware of, or new ones or challenges that people have when it comes to generally PIDs. We're not talking just PPRL, but so I think it's a good thing. And as part of the public access plan for general digital objects, we're hoping to be able to have a good understanding of that across IC. So,
we try to follow standards too, as like the DOI, adopting data site, which seemed like a very reasonable. And then when ODSS set up that contract, clearly working through you, and that was. And our version of the GUID is actually, very similar to the version that was developed for ENDAR back in the late, 2007-ish time frame. And so we're very consistent with GUID generation that is now done over at NDA, which is the repository that's supported by NIMH.
Yeah, that's something that I wanted to ask about. So we have a lot of data posted in NDA with their GUIDs. Would those GUIDs translate automatically into your system, or would there have to be some negotiation over those?
There would need to be some negotiation. Now, in the perfect world, when we started this out, is that we were going to be completely compatible with NDAs. And this was back in the 2010 timeframe. what we are now back to being compatible, and I think as of 2020, we're back to being compatible. But if you have GUIDs that were generated before 2020, there would have to be some harmonization that would be needed to be worked out.
Thanks.
One
Ishwar.
other quick question, Matt, on the metadata elements, the 9 elements. How did that come about? Was there a standard out there, or is that something that evolved internally? I was just curious.
Right. So it's somewhat documented in that paper.
Gotcha.
But that was actually, they had a whole bunch of other information that was going to be part of the GUID back then. They had mother's maiden name and all these other things. And we found that there was just too much data entry or people incorrectly entering information. So we slimmed it down. It had to be things that were immutable. And we also looked at, how often a particular thing, what's a last name, is this unique and a first name is this unique, and combining all those probabilities together to make sure that we had good separation of individuals. And this grouping gave us good responses and good separation for individuals. Oh, Stefano.
Yeah, I noticed that the last term that you have in the list of things that determine the GUID is a government ID number. And is that optional or compulsory?
Optional. Yeah,
Okay.
optional.
Thanks.
Yep.
So Matt, another quick question with regard to the GUID generation itself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming it's a deterministic process, right? So a GUID that's generated, is that like a random number that's generated, or does it in some manner depend on the data that's being used for the GUID generation?
So it is not dependent on the data. So we generate hash codes from the PII. And when the hash codes are sent over to our centralized server, hash codes essentially are one-way encryption.
Right.
Once they're sent over to our server, if any of those hash codes, and they're redundant hash codes to kind of protect against errors in providing the PII, if any of the hash codes matches, we say that person exists, and we return a random number that goes back to the PI to associate, or a pseudo-random number that is associated with that subject. So there's that disconnect of pseudo-random number and the some people call those hash codes tokens, and they assign the tokens to the data. We don't do that. We have that separation there.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Yep. All right. It doesn't look like there are any more questions, and I think we can move on to the repository and data submission. It's all yours, Michelle.
Okay, yeah, my mic took a little time to come off. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
You're good.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Harris, and I'll be talking about the data repository and the validation submission tool. The data repository is the central hub of the BRICS system, providing functionality to manage study information and contribute, upload, and store research data associated with each study. BRICS took a meticulous approach in identifying the critical elements essential to meet the research community's needs to be able to conduct a thorough meta-analysis on the data in the system. Right, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at the data repository. So here is the View Studies table that has all the studies that have submitted or will be submitting data to the system. On the left side is filters that can be used to decrease the number of studies shown. You can filter the number of studies that have data or have shared data with the users of the instance. There's also more filters so that you can filter the data or the studies even more. So here, the studies in the View Studies table, they have submitted, well, they can submit imaging data and clinical assessment data, as well as omics and biosample data. You can also see the data type icons within the View Studies table. So you're able to see what type of data is in that particular study. And as you can see the data type icons here. You have genomics, clinical assessment. Clinical assessment, imaging, preclinical, omics, and biosample. All the studies here in the data repository have collected data using common data elements. For example, if the study collects age, they collect age the same way. If they collect gender, they all collect gender the same way. So when we go to the query tool, and the query tool will be demonstrated in a future BRICS seminar, we can query across studies and aggregate that data. So let me show you some of the metadata in one of the studies. So as you see here, there's a digital object identifier, or DOI, and this is a unique alphanumeric string that's assigned to the study. It provides a stable and permanent link to the data sets for the study in BRICS. The researcher can use this DOI across all their research publications. The study URL can also be included in the study profile. If it's a clinical trial, the clinical trial ID is hyperlinked, and this link will take you to the clinical trials website. Also, the project ID also have hyperlinks, and they will take you to the NIH reporter or the USA spending website, depending on the funding agency for the study. These hyperlinks offer a comprehensive overview of the study's funding, abstract, and objectives. So the study details tab, it provides additional information about the study and research team. The information here is accessible for all studies, regardless of data submission status. It offers an opportunity for investigators to initiate collaboration by making contact with the researcher. Under the documentation tab, they can upload or provide the link to a publication that is related to the study. You have the title of the publication, the link to the publication, and a description of it or the citation. They also have the opportunity to upload a protocol, a script, anything relevant to the study can be uploaded underneath this tab. The data submissions, this just shows the list of the data submissions to the study. The data access report, this is a unique feature. It helps us maintain an audit log of who's accessing the system, where they're downloading the data from, either the query tool or data repository, and when this data was downloaded. This feature is only available to the study owners and study administrators. The permissions tab, shows all the users who have permissions to access the study. And again, this feature is only available to the study owners and study admins. Okay, so this concludes my overview of the data repository. Sorry, just flipping to my slide deck here. Where there, before I move on to the next section about how to submit data, are there any questions? I think I see a hand. Yep.
Looks like Janie. Go ahead.
Hi. So you mentioned that or studies, they used common data elements. So were all the data being collected in the common data element kind of format, or were there some back-end curation that the group did to try to harmonize data elements?
Yep. So I'm going to jump in here. It depends on the instance of BRICS, but most of the instances, for example, FITBR, the Traumatic Brain Injury Repository, the terms and conditions of all the grants require the grantees to submit their data, to collect their data, and to submit their data consistent with the common data elements. We do have also the ability to generate unique data elements. So if a researcher was going to measure something that isn't typically, or a common data element wasn't defined, they go to their program official, and the program official says, yes, this is, it's not a common data element, but it's a good thing to collect and to submit into the system. So we will make a unique data element that allows them to collect and submit that data. So the system's very flexible. Each system can have its own set of data elements, common data elements or unique data elements. We can adapt. In fact, we could deploy a system that supports OMOP, or we could support a system that supports collecting data, say, in a fire resource format. So it's very flexible, and we work with the stakeholders of the repository to configure it to meet their particular requirements.
Thank you.
Oh, hi, Anu.
Yeah, so maybe I missed this. You talked about a study admin and a study, I guess,
Yeah,
Study owner.
so
owner. So
Yeah.
how do you handle, maybe first thing is what's the distinction? And then the second thing is, how do you handle if a consortium wants to deposit a study which comes from different labs, for example? Do you have multiple owners within the system, or is it one individual?
no, we get multiple owners that have access to it. And there's a whole workflow. We can control each individual user's what studies they have access to. So originally when data goes into a study, it's private until the policy of that particular system says that we can share that data. But you can, while the data is private, you can control access to who has access to that. And they can be given different rights. Some users can have administrative rights to that study. Some can just read it. Some can, modify it, those kinds of things. So a lot of flexibility has been added to the system.
And that kind of role is provided to the data owner, right?
Yes,
Or
the
is
data
it
owner,
somebody from the repository side who's handling it?
it can be both. So it just depends on what kind of rights are given to each kind of user. Now for FITBR, we have an operations team that typically handles those kinds of things for all the users of the system. But you could, depending on how you want to set up your particular system, give more control to the users and have fewer admins. But it all depends.
I see. So it's fairly flexible.
Yeah.
Right. Thank
Any
you.
other Yep, sure. Any other questions? We have a little bit more to, Michelle has a little bit more to talk about here, so I'm going to hand it back to Michelle and let you go.
Thank you, Matt. So next, we'll talk about the data submission process. Before data is submitted into the system, the data is validated with a validation tool. This is to ensure the data fits into the criteria of the created data elements and forms. Oh, that's someone said something. Okay. Basically, it's a way to QA and QC the data before it's submitted. The validation tool checks for spelling errors in permissible values, verifies that numeric data falls into minimum and maximum ranges, checks for duplicate data, provides a double check that required, start over. Provides a double check that all required data elements have data submitted. The user will also receive a detailed report for any data discrepancies, errors, and warnings. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. I mentioned previously that different kinds of data can be stored in the data repository. So we not only have a way to upload the data, but we also have a way to package and upload imaging data too. So let's go, let me just open up the submission tool. So let's go through the submission process with some sample data. For users, they have an option to upload all their data at once. If it's in a folder, they can just do upload directory. Since I'm just doing a demonstration, I'm just going to upload one file. So I'll use the option to upload files. So we will upload this and validate it. So this file has errors. So some examples of the errors that we typically see is it could be a different data type that than defined in the data dictionary, such as alphanumeric, numeric, date, time. It could be incorrect permissible values. It could be a problem with the group repeatability. Maybe more than one permissible value was defined when it's a single defined value. Or it could be an incorrect GUID. Looking at these errors in the results detail section, it'll tell you what the error is here in the beginning. So if you look at the first one, the incorrect value was entered. It was NA was entered. And if you look, it tells you what the predefined value range is. So it's male, unknown, female, unspecified, not reported. So NA is not one of these permissible values. So this is why this was flagged as an error. The next one, they put in Black or African American. With this one, there's a missing character. So if you look at the list here at the end, as you see, there's a hyphen in between African and American. So this is why this was flagged. The next, this is also technically not in the predefined value range. As you can see, it's case, control, or unknown. So this is it's a misspelling, it looks like. Control was just misspelled. So once you fix the errors, you should be able to submit the data into the system. So just for time's sake, I have already corrected the errors. So we'll just load up that file. And we'll validate it. As you see, it says all files are valid. But there's also, if you look under the summary, there are some warnings. Warnings mean there are recommended fields that do not have data submitted against them. So data can be submitted if there are warnings, but it cannot be submitted if there are errors. So since this looks great, we're going to go ahead and build the submission package. So you want to choose the study that you have permissions to. I'm logged in as an administrator, so I'm able to see all of the studies, but I do have a test study in here that I will be using. So here, the data set name, you have an opportunity to change it or add additional information. You do have to make sure the data set name is unique. So if it was uploaded prior and archived, the system still does recognize it, and you would have to create another name or change it in some type of way to make it unique. So I just added a 2 at the end of mine, just to change it up a little bit. All right, here it says my submission package is complete. So we'll just click OK. Here's a feature that I like to point out. If there are any data related issues with your data, a description, you can flag this data set and provide a description of the issue, or you can refer to any added documentation to the study. So it can just be a helpful tool for users. So you just want to save that information, and then you can start the submission upload. So at this time, while it's uploading, you don't want to edit the study or the data set or close the upload tool. So it's giving me a message saying that my uploads have been completed. You will also receive an email letting you know that the uploads have been completed. So there's different ways we try to communicate with you that the uploads have been completed. You can also just go and look in the data repository if you don't want to wait for the email. You can go back to your study in the repository. So you just want to search for that. Then under the data submissions tab, you will see the file you just uploaded. You can tell by the date and time that it was uploaded. The BRICS system can be customized to establish and implement policy configurations. For this particular instance, the data that was just uploaded is set to private status. So it's only visible to the people who are part of the study and anyone they've given permissions to for the study. So based on the data sharing policy, this data will eventually be moved to what we call a shared state. And anyone who has been given access to the system through the Data Access Committee will have access to the shared data. So I trust that my explanation has given you a comprehensive grasp of the metadata within the data repository. This repository is a valuable resource of research information characterized by stringent quality checks that result in high quality data. This concludes my demonstration. Were there any questions?
That was really great, Michelle. Thank you. Yep, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. I did want to reiterate the one item that Michelle mentioned is that, through this validation of the against the common data elements of the data, that gets a first level of kind of the QA/QC of data. And by doing that, it also makes the data consistent across the studies and be able to aggregate that data very quickly. So it doesn't look like
So
new.
sorry, I always have a lot of questions. So with the validation tool, the file that they're uploading, do you have a template that's downloadable? And does it have, for example, drop down value sets that they can pick?
Well, they're supposed to collect the data that is consistent. So whenever they set up their forms, so they could use ProForms to collect the data, or they could say use RedCap, or they could use OpenClinica, or any of those tools. They just need to set up their tool to use the common data elements with the proper question and the proper permissible values. And then they just need to save off the file as a CSV.
I see.
Specifically, the CSV file, it does not have the drop downs in the file for the users doing the upload. So it's a file where every column corresponds to kind of a question that's being asked, and the rows correspond to the PPRL or GUID value. So again, like Matt said, if you use ProForms, our electronic data capture tool, in that you have a graphical user interface, real-time data collection, where you would actually see all of that. There could be drop downs for being able to real-time capture that data. But if you're using an offline system like Matt talked about, such as RedCap, you would export your data and conform it into the CSV template that we do provide. But again, that template does not have drop downs in it for uploading your data.
I see. And all of the permissible values, if they are linked to any ontologies, do they have those get concept annotation? Either when they're collecting, so they understand that it is, being collected according to some standard, or within BRICS?
So yeah, so we have again, the common data elements are highly structured, and we try to stay very consistent with the format that NLM has. We're able to assign concepts to those data elements. So here's our data dictionary. We can also export, just as an FYI, we could export these. I'm going to go to a data element here, search. We can export a data element in RedCap format if we wanted to, so that then you could ingest that into your RedCap tool. But let me just find one here this one doesn't have one. Let me just see if I can find one quickly. Search for, I'm gonna go with age, just because I think it was a simple one. We haven't identified, what we're in the process of now is adding UMLS codes to all of our data elements. That gives it that ontology. Oh, age wasn't a good one because it finds all these other. Let me just do this age val. It's the actual variable name as opposed to slowly. There's age val. Oh, we don't have. Olga, are you there? Do we have a specific variable that has UMLS coding?
So Matt, that's
Just
okay. I can follow up offline.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want to take people's time.
Yep.
Thanks
So,
anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end here. Unique data element, common data element right there. Let's just see if it's there. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So we've identified and we're building a tool actually to help us with this process where we have the the concept identifier, as well as what terminology source that it came from. So that's a way of actually, if we're looking across repositories and we have the same concept, but different data elements, we're able to at least identify that these same kinds of things that are in these two different databases and likely could be aggregated after some manual harmonization. But we're right at time here, so I want to thank everyone for joining in. We're going to be doing this on a monthly basis. Our next month meeting will be near the beginning of February at the same time on Thursday morning. And we're going to be talking next week or next month. Let's go back into the system. We're going to be talking about Proforms, which is our electronic data capture tool, as well as some tools that are associated with the Proforms tool. So with that, thanks everybody, and hope we'll see you next month. And feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or you want to see a specific demo. We're more than happy to meet with you individually. So with that, have a great Thursday, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.